So this session will cover the 12-week periodised plan. At this point, you should have spoken to the client, completed the client consultation, and be very comfortable and aware of advanced training methods for CV and resistance, and also have a good understanding of which fitness tests can be used for the client. Within the 12-week plan, it will start off and it will ask you about a risk stratification tool. So just as a reminder, we have a mix of different risk stratification tools, which are a next level to the PARQ. So for example, we've got National Quality Assurance Framework, and we've also got Irwin and Morgan there. So do make sure that you take a look at your PT toolkit. We have an absolute plethora of different fitness tests that we can do with the client. Remember, in the consultation, we should have discussed static fitness tests such as height, weight, BMI, blood pressure, waist-hip ratio, and the manual will continue to look at dynamic fitness tests, which can be used to support the client's SMART goals. For example, to improve result on Queen's College step test by XYZ. So do refer back to your fitness testing here before you go into your 12-week plan. And this will help you to be absolutely 100% clear on what the client's goals are and ways that you can measure the goals and different ingredients that you can bring into that 12-week plan. In addition to your PT toolkit, please do look at Unit 5. Unit 5 has everything you need to be a PT, so it goes into the principles of program design. It will revisit guidelines such as the World Health Organization, 150 minutes per week of CB activity, 75 minutes vigorous, and it will also recap on your rep ranges. So do, before you sit down to write your 12-week plan, be 100% certain on what the rep ranges should be. So for example, if we are training for endurance, we should be looking at rep ranges in the 15 rep maxes. So for example, just to revisit this, so endurance, we should be seeing rep ranges of about 15 reps, 60% of a 1 rep max. If we're looking at hypertrophy, we should be seeing rep ranges, for example, of 10 to 12s, 70% of a 1 rep max. I'm just going to make those notes there. So endurance, for example, 15 reps at 60%, 1 RM. If the client has specified hypertrophy, we're looking more at 10 to 12 reps, which would give you 70%, 1 RM. If the client is specifying strength, then we're looking at probably 6 to 8 rep max. That will take us into the 80%, 1 RM. And if you've got a client who is already very conditioned, then we're looking at 1 to 4 reps, which brings them into that power-based zone. So obviously that will be 90 to 100%, 1 RM. So please do revisit this manual. Please do be 100% sure on what zones your client is going to be working in. And if we just remind ourselves there, if I'm in the endurance-based zone, then predominantly it's going to be type 1 muscle fibers, the finer muscle fibers. And then as we go into endurance to hypertrophy, we're looking at the more dense muscle fibers. And then obviously into strength, we're looking into more power-based, strength and power-based. And then obviously power is going to be your dominant muscle fibers are going to be the type 2B. So that being said, if your client has asked for endurance, we should not see strength and power in their 12-week plan. If the client has asked for strength and power, we shouldn't, unless you can rationalize it, see endurance in their 12-week plan. Only give them ingredients which they have asked for, unless you can rationalize why you've made a change. So do revisit this section, as I said there. So I've done a quick version there, but you've got your table there with your percentage of a 1 rep max. As you scroll through, revisit all of your advanced methods, such as your pyramids, your drop sets, your supersets, your pre-exhaust, your post-exhaust, your cluster sets. Be 100% sure on your work-rest ratios. For example, if I'm going to do a CP interval. The wet rest ratio is 1 to 3. For example, 10 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So just a reminder, everyone, before you sit down to write your 12-week plan, you must be comfortable with advanced training methods, percentage 1 rep max, percentage max heart rate, what the different methods are, and what the adaptations and the benefits are of these methods. Otherwise, you're not in a position to then write your 12-week plan. The 12-week plan is a periodized plan. So with this said, it's essentially as you've now got the aims and the goals for the client, and you now need to go and cherry pick the right methods. So once you've done that, which is this part here, I now know I'm going to do drop sets, I'm going to do supersets upper body because they've asked for X, Y, and Z. I've got a really good idea of what my ingredients are. We now move into the different methods of periodization. So periodization, this is where we start to break our training plan into phases or cycles. And essentially, this is based on general adaptation syndrome. So as you can see there, and you'll see this as a trend through all your periodized methods and approaches, they all work predominantly on that a stressor comes in that forces the body into the alarm phase, which then makes the body have to make a change so that it can actually deal with the stress that you are now placing on that body. So if somebody wanted to become better at working in the lactic zone, then obviously what we would do, we might give them lactic intervals, or we might give them tempo training so that the body goes into the alarm phase and then has to make those adaptations. Very similar to strength. So if we wanted to recruit predominantly type 2B muscle fibers, then the loads would match the percentage 1 rep max. We've got to see that stressor coming in. Now, when we say stressor, we don't mean kill the client. So with this, your job as a personal trainer is to choose the appropriate level of overload. So remember our principles of training: specificity, progression, overload, and reversibility. So what we're doing is we are periodizing this plan and sprinkling those ingredients in at the right time so that we just get that alarm phase, so that the body has to adapt and make a change. Essentially, this can be referred to also as the SAID principle. So your job with your 12-week plan is to ensure that you're applying the SAID principle, so specific adaptivity to imposed demand. So essentially, you're going to choose a specific area: strength, endurance, hypertrophy, lactic zone, creatine, phosphate, and you're going to bring that in and overload the client just to the right level at the right time so that the body has to make a specific adaptation to the imposed demand that you've placed on that body. So if somebody was a long distance runner, you might do more CV-based endurance. If somebody is going into activities such as Total Warrior, Tough Mudder, High Rocks, you would bring elements of lactic work in there. So just to highlight, everyone, please do refer to your manual here. I'm going to go to the PowerPoint for this so that we can just talk through that. But just to be aware, you've got all of that fabulous information at your fingertips in your manual as well. So let's just have a look at this. And we'll just chat through, well, what is periodization and what are we hoping to achieve from that? Different types of periodization, there are a lot. So if you look at your manual, normally they will reference bumper. There are quite a few. My advice to you all would be to stick with something quite straightforward for your first one, such as linear periodization, where as the intensity goes up, the volume is going to come down. So let's take a look at the different types of periodization. So what we should hope to achieve by the end of the lesson is to have a good understanding of what is periodization, why do we use it, what are the divisions referred to in a periodized plan, and how we might adapt the ingredients in a periodized plan or use a different type of periodized plan depending on the client that we've got in front of us. So ask yourself, what is periodization? What is the aim of periodization? And what types of program periodization have you potentially encountered previously? So it could be something that you feel that you're quite new to, but as we go through, you may be thinking, well, actually, I have used that before. So you may have used the Couch to 5K, which is a very common periodized plan. Definitely available for free, as it were, and available to most people to download. So very, very straightforward. As we can see, periodization and bumper, if you're interested in doing a little bit more research, bumper is the go-to. So we've got bumper and half. And as we can see there, this will split the periodized plan into cycles. So essentially, it's a structured manipulation of training variables over time. Now, training variables, remember, we don't just need to talk about intensities. We can also talk about the types of training. So that could be advanced methods. It could be the modality of the training. Phase 1, I might refer more to resistance machines, more supported exercises. And then I might bring in some more challenging types of exercise as I move into phase 2 and phase 3, such as cables or free weights. So the long-term goal is referred to as the macro cycle. That's your total duration. So that for us is 12 weeks. If you go online, please do research. If you have a runner or if you have a certain activity, boxer, do go online and look to research periodization for and put your sport in. Their durations could be on season, off season, pre-competition, post-competition. So just an interesting one to have a look at. But for us, our macro cycle is 12 weeks. The macrocycle is then split further into divisions which are called mesocycles. A little bit of a typo on this PowerPoint here. So mesocycles are individual blocks within the macrocycle. So for example, weeks 1 to 4 is your base phase. That's your first zone, as it were, for the client. And then you have your medium-term mesocycle, and then you have your long-term mesocycle. So if I had somebody that was progressing from, say, endurance into hypertrophy, the ingredients in the first mesocycle should look very different to the ingredients in the third or long-term mesocycle. Within the mesocycle, we've got microcycles. So that could be a program that we participate in for 1 week. So just as a recap there, macrocycle, the total duration that you have to complete this program in. Imagine at the end of that 12 weeks, they are going into a competition of some sort. So pre-competition would be that third phase. The macrocycles are split into 3 further mesocycles for us. Depending on the duration, there could be more mesocycles. The mesocycles are split into further divisions, which are microcycles. This could be 1 week out of a 12-week plan. For yourselves, for your assignment, currently, you will do the overarching plan. You'll split that into 3 goals. You will summarize frequency, intensity, time, and type for each microcycle, and you'll be asked to do a program card for example, day 1, week 1, day 1, week 5, and another one for day 1, week 10. So we just have here a clear summary of each division. Very important to remember, we should never just see throughout the 12 weeks masses of increase in volume, because remember, if we can do more of something, it's easier. So essentially, if we want to progress the client towards strength or hypertrophy, we should see the volume coming down from the endurance, which is why I was just saying at the beginning of the session there, please do make sure that you're 100% clear on volume and intensity, rep ranges, percentage of a 1 rep max before you try to do your 12-week plan. So what we shouldn't say, for example, is day 1, somebody is able to do 30 minutes of long, slow distance, and then day 25, they're able to do 40 minutes of fartlek. This would be quite a significant jump. So because fartlek is much more intense than long, slow distance, if we bring fartlek in, we need to respect the fact that fartlek uses all 3 different energy systems and is very intense and shocks the body. Therefore, we would reduce intensity. Otherwise, that's too much, far too much overload for the client. One of the easier methods, which you'll see here, one of the easier methods, and in your manual, it's the first one, is linear periodization. Linear, it just refers to this. So as volume decreases, intensity increases, and vice versa. They have an inverse relationship. So for example, phase one, you might have endurance-based reps, you might have endurance-based methods, aerobic intervals, long, slow distance. And then as you move into phase two, if you're going to bring in strength work and fartlek, we should see that volume start coming down. Another method which you can follow if you are a bit of an overthinker, this is an excellent method to follow, and you can find a few different variations of this one. So this is a set plan. So if you're a little bit unsure, once you've chosen your methods and your intensities and you know where they're starting from and where they're going to finish, for example, they could start off a 12-week plan at 70% of a 1 rep max, and you know that they're going to finish the plan on 85% of a 1 rep max. Week one, you would train them at a low version of that. So for example, I would go 65% in week one, then I would go up to my 70%, and my peak would be my 85%. And then I would go back down in week four to my 75%. So it's planned recovery. So this is called step loading. And again, please do research. You've got examples in the manuals, but there's a lot of information out there. You might be able to find a step loading plan for a specific sport or individual. But really good idea if you do tend to be an overthinker, you're not quite there with your 12-week plan. This gives you a set plan to follow. I've mentioned linear. So as we said, good for beginners. And that's where, as the intensity increases, volume would decrease. Non-linear is your step loading. Block periodization. So with this one, now, when you first start looking at these, they do seem a little bit overwhelming, but if we think about it, they're all on the same principle. So we never just go rushing straight in there and shocking the body as soon as they get into phase one. There's an element of a base or foundation phase into phase one, lots of activity in phase two, and then we have phase three, which is more like the pre-competition phase. So with block periodization, again, if you're an overthinker, you don't feel confident at having free rein to change your intensities over your weeks, this is another good call because you've got a set plan to follow. So it could be, and obviously you can see the ranges there, so you would just tweak your ranges depending where your client was and where they were aiming to go. So as we can see, we've got 50 to 70% for the first 2 to 6 weeks and 75 to 90% for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Now, in terms of a 12-week plan, if I'm going for the lower intensity version of this, then I'm probably going to go with a 60 to 70% for the first 2 weeks. And then for the next 4 weeks, I might start taking it up to 75 to 80%. And then for the next 2 weeks, I might take it up to 90%. That's my peak. So we can play with these zones and we can play with the durations. It's got to depend on your total duration for your 12-week plan. But as you can see, we can see that alarm phase coming in that we were talking about at the very beginning of the call there. So the accumulation phase basically is more of an endurance-based approach. It's a lighter approach. Then we start to increase that shock to the system in the transmutation phase. So moderate volumes of training at higher intensities. And then we have our peak phase there. So they do look a little bit overwhelming at first, but hopefully you'll be able to see the pattern as we look through the different phases and the different types of periodization. This is a very simple one. So this one is right preparation. So that'd be phase one. Competition, that's where all the ingredients are thrown in. So that would be phase two. And then we've got recovery there. Now your recovery could be, for example, weeks 9 to 12, and that could be an element of deload in there. Only ever deload really if you are working with specific significant loads, you know, you're 80, 90, 100% of a 1 rep max there. So the element of recovery comes in before the competition to improve performance ready for the competition. Just a tip for you, avoid making significant changes in weeks 10 to 12. We need to make sure that the body can actually adapt and gain the benefit of those changes before we hit the competition in week 13. Really simple method here with the pyramid approach here. Now remember the notes that I made at the very beginning there. So essentially this would be, if we think about where we were, If we were following the pyramid approach, we would be going with the 15 reps, the 60% 1RM. We would then move into the next phase. You change that color if I can there. It's going to let me go back. So if we go into the hypertrophy phase here, we would expect to see that become 12 reps, 70%. I'm just separating off the zones, everyone. I know there are different zones in your manuals. The reason I do this, it just keeps it really clear in the comparison between them. 6 to 8 reps for this one. And then obviously power at the top there, we would expect this to be, because we've got our number 1 and our 100% at the top of the pyramid. So this would be sort of 90 to 100%. Happy days. Now, in terms of your 12-week plan, depending where you are starting, this is a really clear one to use. Everyone's fab one to use this one. So if I'm starting a client who's at the very beginning and they're in muscular endurance and they want to get to strength, let's be honest, we might not have time in 12 weeks to transition them through the 3 layers of the pyramid. So if I was, and this is specifically why I put 6 to 8 reps of a 1 rep max, we may have time in 12 weeks to transition them from phase 1 and 2, from the 15 reps to the 12 reps, and then touching on to phase 3 into the 8 reps. If I've got somebody who is a lot more conditioned, I'm not going to start them at the bottom of the pyramid. I might be starting them with the hypertrophy, 10 to 12 reps, and I may be able to transition them through to, say, 4 rep max. It's one of these things, everyone, where essentially this is your plan. When you start working with your client, you'll be able to change this. So, you know, if they do get stronger faster, then brilliant, we'll move them on to the next section. Do remember that it is not the only way that we have to change intensity, time, type. We can also change progressive variables across your 12 weeks. Please, please, please don't be putting ingredients in there such as hypertrophy, strength and power if the client hasn't asked for them. So remember, at the beginning of the 12-week plan, you're going to do an overview of who my client is, what they want to achieve, and which ingredients I'm choosing for them. So it could be you're there, phase 2. I'm there. I don't feel a need to change these drop sets because obviously the load is naturally going to increase on my drop set as I progress through. The load, my 70% of a 1 rep max is going to change because the load that gets me to 70% of a 1 rep max will naturally change as we go through the program. So please don't make changes unless you can rationalize why we've made the changes. If you can look at your 12-week plan and say, yeah, I've got the right ingredients, I've brought them in nice and gradually for this client, I'm not going to kill the client, then don't be changing anything as long as we've got that progressive overload running through. Point being, it could be once you're there, you think, well, actually, I feel like I do want to add a little bit more progression, but I don't necessarily want to change the overload, the intensity, or the type of training. That being said, this is where you've got these progressive variables. So in phase 1, we might use more general training, so general machines, very simple, straightforward, you know, a leg press, something really, really basic. And as we move into phase 2, we might make those more complex movements. We might start bringing in more cables, multi-directional work, multi-planar. So remember, we've got the sagittal plane of movement. So sagittal, S for sides. So we can only move forward and back in the sagittal plane of movement. So that's quite common. A lot of people will stay in the sagittal plane of movement. We can challenge them in their program by becoming multi-planar. So that means we can get them to change different directions. We could start bringing in different functional kits, such as your medicine ball slams, your battle ropes, and so on, which you'll see examples of those in your unit 5. So do have a look through because there's a massive information in there with regards to the functional exercises. So just some different examples there. So if we were doing this together, we would be looking at an overview for Audrey. But if I just, let's have a look at Audrey here. So as we read through, we get the background for Audrey. She's had her children, she's put weight on, she wants to lose 2 stone, she's looking at inch loss. Remember, there's no such thing as a spot reduction. We can't do that. So we should never promise that we can actually lose inches specifically by a specific exercise. But through our advanced methods, we may see an element of improvement. For example, if we're using aerobic intervals, which are fat burning. So we're looking at 3 sessions a week for Audrey for max. So from here, you would choose the ingredients for Audrey and you would try to put them into a 12-week plan. Okay, so my best advice to you all is to map this out first. So never go straight into your 12-week plan with your Active IQ document. Even if you handwrite this on a piece of A4, always map everything out first to see whether it makes sense. So if this was Audrey, so obviously this isn't Audrey, but if it was, and we think about where Audrey was, we wouldn't be putting lactic intervals and fartlek in for Audrey, would we? Because it said she was just starting out. We definitely wouldn't be going in there with supersets and pyramids and into our drop sets. So if we just do an example, so I'll just overwrite this one for Audrey. So remember, we had, for example, to lose 2 inches from the waist. It's always a good idea to make sure you've got your goals at the top there. So I'm going to go with, essentially, these are the overarching goals, aren't they? So say, for example, I added in to improve distance on Cooper's Run by 50 meters. See how we're using those fitness tests to actually, because she is looking at fat burning essentially and weight loss. So endurance-based CV work will do that. So that would be a good goal for that. We could get a little bit of strength in there as well. So to improve 1 rep max by 5%. So as we go into phase 2, we're going to work more on muscular density. As you all know, increased utilization of muscle fibers will recruit more motor units and therefore will have more metabolic changes. So they will start to lose their body fat, but in a different way. They're not burning fat as fuel. It's more about afterburn is going to increase, and utilization of the muscle fibers means that we're using more energy. Goals of phase 3. There we go. So you notice there, with Audrey, there was talk of fat burning. She wants to start going to classes a little bit more. So essentially, I haven't got anything that jumps out from Audrey's that says she specifically wants upper body strength or lower body strength or anything like that. So essentially what we would do there is we would run through, there's our information on the screen. So with Audrey, I'm going to go with more endurance-based work. So straight away, this will go to 70%. If we think about the timings, well, before we do that, let's look at the method. I'm going to choose aerobic intervals for Audrey because she's just starting out. Now, remember in your manuals, you will have a specific breakdown of the work rest ratios. So 3 mins at 7 RPE and 3 mins at 6 RPE. Okay, now don't change everything for the sake of changing things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this over. And then I'm going to think, right, okay, with Audrey, so she said she could go up to 4 times a week. Do we desperately need to be changing her to 4 times a week? Well, I don't think she's at the point where she's going to be doing really heavy duty sessions where we would need to. If we think about a progression from an aerobic interval to be able to do more continuous version, long, slow distance, so she is now able to do the full duration. Let me think about it. So I'm going to put that in as times 3, so that's like 18 minutes. So that would be a push for her to be able to do 15 to 20 minutes long, slow distance. Okay, so again, we copy this over. Is there anything in Audrey's overview that suggests that, right, okay, I want to become stronger, more powerful, and I want to be able to improve tolerance of lactic acid? And the answer is no. So because of that, we don't desperately need to change a lot here. What I probably would do, I just start overloading the intensity a little bit. Now, I've kept it at 75% because we don't want to go near the lactic zone for Audrey, because there is nothing in that overview that suggests that we need to. And then I would potentially 20 to 25 minutes of long, slow distance. Okay, everyone, so we're now going to do the same with the resistance-based training. Now, your decision is going to come once you've done your CV, map out your CV, map out your resistance, look at the two of them together and decide, is that too much for one session? So when I come over here to do my resistance, the intensities, a lot of the time, unless there's a specific target, will pretty much match each other to some extent there. So I think with Audrey, she's not really doing anything at the moment, is she? So I'm going to start her off in the endurance-based zone. And I'm just going to do total body, multiple sets, which is what you did at level 2. Okay, she's not ready for it. Remember that base phase where we're laying the foundations. Same thing again. Let's just bring this over. Right, okay, so we've laid the foundations. Now let's look back at our goals. Right, I want to start getting that 1 rep max up there. Let's use a linear approach. So let's use linear loading. So I'm going to change this 65 to 70% of a 1 rep max. Remember, we do need to change our rep ranges because our percentage of a 1 rep max has changed. So that's our target, which will tie in with, right, okay, increasing 1 rep max and increasing hypertrophy, calorie burning, increased metabolic rate, EPOC, afterburn. You'll also have improved embedding of neuromuscular pathways, which sounds like a big mouthful, but essentially we're saying those motor neurons are getting out there faster. So the more motor neurons flying around, the more muscle fibers we're using, the more calories we're burning. We could, at this point, I think, could get a little bit more inventive, I think. What we try not to do, everyone, is make too many elements of overload. Remember that alarm phase. We want to create an element of an alarm phase, but we don't want significant overload to the point where the client's going to fail. So I've already increased the resistance. I've already reduced the reps. So we could, for example, weeks 5 and 6, stay with the multiple sets and then eventually transition into total body supersets. Here again, I'm going to copy this over. There we go. Let's remind ourselves of the goals there. So we're happy with that running the mile on the treadmill because our CV reflects that. We're now getting into long, slow distance or constant pace, steady state. So we've achieved the goal with the CV and we need to head towards a little bit of hypertrophy. We haven't got time to move into strength, and Audrey hasn't asked for strength at that point. So I don't desperately need to be making a lot of changes with my rep ranges at this point. So do I need to change anything? Probably not, everyone. So I'm just going to pause this share. And then if we just remind ourselves who Audrey is, let's go back to it. Now, I want you all to do this once you've finished your 12-week plan. Go back to your client and ask yourself, have I given them the right ingredients? So if we have a look here, she's put on a lot of weight, yeah, lost self-confidence. So I haven't put anything in there that's going to be too aggressive or make her feel uncomfortable. It's very progressive. A few inches off the waist, hips, arms, improve her CV fitness. 3 sessions, 4 at the max. She's got a holiday coming up in 6 months. There's nothing in there that talks about upper body strength or power, lower body strength. There's nothing jumping out at me with Audrey. So Don't be putting things in unless you can fully rationalize the reason that you're putting them in. So let's have a look back at Audrey and see whether we're still happy with what we've done. We've kept her in the fat burning zone. We've kept her aerobic. Now, this is not to say, everyone, that once Audrey's finished this 12-week plan, she might get a bit of a bug. And in that respect, she may be absolutely buzzing and say, well, actually, I want to leave all of that behind. I'm ready for something a little bit more aggressive now. And we're all aware that low volume, high intensity training, your HIIT training, your Tabata, your high rocks kind of, your power-based exercises, your CrossFit, we know that they will get you the results, but in a shorter space of time. Not appropriate for a beginner. If we are going to use any of those exercises, we need to periodize the methods that we're bringing in. We need to get there gradually. So it could be that this is our first 12-week plan with Audrey, and then we look into, right, okay, let's start reducing the volume of your training sessions. Audrey might still do long, slow distance. She might do that herself, going out for a jog on a Saturday morning, and then you might bring in stronger gym-based sessions where you're splitting the routine, upper lower body splits and so on. That way, we're going to be burning calories through changes in metabolism as opposed to burning fat as a fuel. And here's another example. Now, my advice is always, always, always plan this out on one sheet of paper, double check, have I hit the targets, have I hit the goals? Is this in line with where my client is starting from? Is this in line with where my client wants to finish? So as we've said, for frequency, intensity, time and type, this is all we essentially need. So for here, I don't desperately need to be saying that I'm doing my LSD on a treadmill. You can do LSD outside as well. So we're just giving frequency, intensity, time, and type. Just going to go to the 12-week plan so you can see one that's been completed. Now let's take a look at a completed 12-week plan. So this section, we want a full overview of your client. Now, do remember, everyone, you can pull a lot of this information from your client interview template, which you've already completed and been observed discussing with the client. So do put a lot of the information in there. What's their current level? What are their aims, aspirations, and so on? Now, in this section here, please don't forget to put in an overview and analysis of previously collected health and fitness data. So BMI, height, weight, waist to ratio, and your dynamic fitness test is there as well, there, as we can see. Remember, we started the call looking at the risk stratification tool used and the client's risk. For everybody on this course, it should be low risk. You are not qualified to work with anybody that has any risks. That would be level 3 exercise referral. As you can see, we're now aware of periodization strategies. So remember the ones that we talked about. We had linear and non-linear. Linear was easier for a beginner. So that was as the intensity increases, the volume is going to decrease. We had step loading, block periodization, and we had the pyramid as well. So you choose which one suits you better, and you would just highlight that there here. From this section here, essentially, this is your rationale. So as you can see, excellent example here. We're talking about, well, what is the client hoping to achieve? Therefore, these are the advanced methods that I'm choosing. This is how I'm going to do them. So this is a really clear example of this student who has fully understood the advanced methods and chosen the right methods for their client. You should have a lot of this information following the consultation. So as we can see there, there's the full rationale. You know, I've chosen resistance machines, I've chosen compound work there. And then this student's also mentioned the intensities and the advanced methods. As I said, everyone, I think this is a particularly strong example. You may decide to split the routine as this person has here. So if it gets a little bit too heavy duty towards phase 2, where we're into 90%, 80%, and it's too much to put into one workout, you may decide to split the routine at that point into an upper lower body split or a push-pull split. You may decide to do longer distance running outside of the gym session. So frequency might be 4 times a week, but one of those is LSD in a park run, and then the other 4 are the gym-based sessions. So as I said, everyone, this is a particularly exceptional example here, but what we should see is a rationale for your choice and linking it to the advanced methods and why you've chosen those for the client. This page here, this is where it gets a little bit stressful for most because of the layout of the document. Please don't struggle with this if your laptop is not able to deal with certain displays, certain software. Please do reach out to your training provider. We're not assessing your IT ability. It could be that you create a separate document and insert it in here. Sometimes we have people using Excel spreadsheets. As long as we have that signed and dated and we can validate that as being your work, more often than not, most providers will accept that, but that's a conversation you'll have to have with your individual training provider. So as we can see here, fabulous long-term goals at the top. Can we see those numbers popping out there? So BMI 27 to 25. We've got Cooper's 3-mile walk test in there. We can see those numbers popping through. Now, there's a lot of goals here. I'm not expecting everybody to put as many goals in here, but I would say maybe 1 to 2 clear goals for each mesocycle, just so that we know what ingredients should be under each section, as it were. So we've got those numbers there. Now, if I'm looking at the first goal, I should see program cards that have 60 to 70%, 30 minutes. So let's have a look here. So as we go down and we can see in the long term there, can we see the one-to-one interval training coming in? Absolutely fabulous example, everyone. You'll get the numbers in there. If you put in the numbers in, we can measure these goals and see what the outcome is. Right, this is the exciting part. Now, I've showed you a fit mapper, and you're probably going to see why I've showed you a fit mapper. Because this can look a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but essentially, all this is our fit mapper, but split into 12 individual microcycles instead of our 4-week blocks. So if we think about it, if you do type up your fit mapper, you can pull the information over here. Now, essentially, the only thing I would say, and this is a fabulous example, is that essentially what we should have here are headings FITT, ideally. So what I would do, everyone, is CV, FITT, and then underneath, resistance, FITT. And as we can see, this student here has done a brilliant job. So we have got the numbers in there, how many sessions, what's the duration, you know, what's the type as well. So if I transferred this based on what this student said here, it's just disappearing off there. They're saying that they're going to do 2 CV sessions. The intensity is 70%. The time is 20 mins. And the type is steady state. So their information is there, everyone, but ideally we should see that FITT. Now, hopefully that's looking a little bit less scary. Now, remember, we don't desperately need to change our training program every week. So it could be that you're saying, actually, weeks 1 to 2, I'm not going to change anything because they're going to stay with that for a good couple of weeks. Now, if they decide to do that, let's just clear this out, see what we're doing. Boom, there's our first 2 weeks done. And it could be in week 3, that's when we start changing, for example, from an aerobic interval into your LSD. So hopefully that helps with the layout of that section there. As I said, it can look a little bit overwhelming, but essentially what Active IQ want from you is this. Please do put FITT in there. And we would just, so essentially in each column, we just want two blocks there. So single set, all resistance machines. So that is lacking. So this student's done an amazing job with the overview, definitely has done an amazing job, but we're not covering FITT. So for example, if it was Audrey, I would go 60%, 1 RM. The time is your reps, 15 reps. And the type is, well, what type of training? I haven't done anything in phase 1 with Audrey. I'm just going to do my multiple sets. Remember, we're not going to rush things with Audrey. Here we go. And then as we move into, for example, just going to use this one as an example. Yeah. So if I go from here, let's imagine I'm now into my phase 2. And if this was Audrey, scoot this one down, how would my resistance have changed? Right, remember with Audrey, we were transitioning to 70% and we dropped our reps down to 12. And then we started bringing in some supersets, everyone. Can you remember that? So supersets. There we go. Again, we would not be changing this for the sake of changing it. As long as we're achieving overload, we don't just randomly change things. So there we go. That's how it would look. Just move these down. Okay, so this is essentially your fit. So if I just stop that share there, let's just take another look back at Audrey. Which was this one here. So map it out your 4 weekly first. As we can see there, yeah, that matched what we were just doing there. So we didn't really change anything for that first block. We stayed with multiple sets. Then we started doing the supersets. So for this one, we're not going to change anything. That's essentially where we are. So let's go back to your 12-week plan. So as I said, everyone, this does look a little bit scarier, but please, please, please do just set up in your blocks, fit for CV, fit for resistance. If you've done your planning, your mapper, it should just be a case of just pulling that information over. And obviously just separate it out so you can see everything on the same page there. Right, next step. Now, with fit, we haven't said, well, where are we going to do the steady state? Is it treadmill? Is it bike? So what we do is we ask you to do 3 program cards. So I want you to imagine that your first program card is from day 1, week 1. Second one is day 1, week 5. And the third one is day 1, week 9. So essentially you should have 3 very different program cards. So if we look at Audrey on day 1, vertically, we were expecting to see steady state and multiple sets. If we look at Audrey on week 5, we should be seeing a program card which covers supersets and probably a little bit more LSD. And then the same thing for week 9, total body supersets. Obviously, if your client's very different, it may be they've got a lot more changing as they go into phase 3. So essentially, this is a program card which shows in detail, well, how is Audrey going to do the LSD? How is she going to do her supersets? And that's your choice, everyone. And remember, think about the modality. So with somebody like Audrey, you might do more machine-based, more compound-based activities in phase 1, and then transition into more free weights and multifunctional and multi-planar exercises in phase 2. So 3 program cards, 1 from each phase. Refer to your level 2 program cards as well, everyone. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. As long as the warm-up is appropriate for your client and the cool down is appropriate for the client, you can bring them over as a base and then obviously just adapt them depending on the overload of the main session. The third and final part of your 12-week plan is, well, hang on a minute, that's lovely if the weather's great or, you know, the gym's not busy. Well, what if it was busy? What if I wanted to go outside? What if the client got bored and said, well, actually, I'm really fed up of being in the gym. Can we do something a little bit different? Thank you very much. So there's a sheet here, and you will find this, I do believe, in Unit 5. So we'll take a quick look at that in a moment. So Unit 5, you'll also find a whole section which is all about working in areas which are not specifically designed for exercise. So obviously as a PT, we need to make sure we've got an accident book, first aid kit, mobile phone. We've got all of the screening documents set up. We're insured, and that section will cover all of this in detail. There's also a section on partner assisted work and working in groups as well. So how could the session be adapted for group training? And partner assisted. Partner assisted, back in my day, I used to do a lot of partner assisted work. It's 2025 or could be 2026, 27 when you're listening to this. Always make sure that the clients are happy with that. Normally it's groups that have been working together for quite some time. So there are some different examples in how to bring in partner assisted activities. Okay, so just as we close that down, let's go back to the manual and let's look for that section on alternative environments, just to close that down. So here is your unit 5. As we said, so it follows in a quite nice chronological order, doesn't it? So it's just a bit of here's a recap on all of your methods. This is what you can do. Okay, we're ready to put it into a plan. Let's talk about periodization. Scoot past these. We've got some example plans in there as well. And here's our section on alternative environments for you to look at. So I've mentioned a couple of key points there for your health and safety. And then we do have a section on your group personal training with some good ideas there as well. So we can use those for the plan. So that's your 12-week plan. So let's just close it down. A lot of work. Do please work through it in sections as we've done. Try to avoid lots of stopping and starting, because if we lose the flow, that tends to make it a little bit harder. So essentially, if we go back to the 12-week plan, at the beginning, this is your client interview that you should have already done. So you've sat down with your client, you've given them a good interview, you've done some fitness testing. We make sure that we're safe. So that's your risk stratification tools. We decide which method of periodization we're going to use. We give an overview of these are my ingredients and this is how I'm going to bring them in and this is why. Then we set some specific SMART goals here. Now, we don't necessarily need to outline SMART at this point, but I would definitely get some good numbers in, as we can see here, 3, low to moderate, 60 to 70%. Once you've mapped that out, so remember I said at this point, please do use a fit mapper, even if it's your own, if it's another spreadsheet or something like that, just so that you can see everything on the same page, because it does tend to throw people a little bit when they then move on to this section. So I would ideally get it mapped out on a bigger document where you can see everything clearly. You can have a think, is it in line with where the client's starting? And am I going to where the client's finishing? Have they got the right ingredients? Fabulous. Is it progressive? Is it periodized? Is it going to kill the client? Hopefully not. Is it shocking the body gradually? That's what we want. Once you've got that sorted, you would just bring that over into each microcycle. And as I said, please do use headings: frequency, intensity, time, and type. The time and the type sometimes get mixed up. So remember your timings. If you were doing CP intervals, please do put your ratios in there as well. And your times for your resistance, that's your rep ranges. Your intensity is your percentage 1 rep max. From there, you will write 3 program cards. Choose one from day 1, phase 1, one from day 1, phase 2, and one from day 1, phase 3, which should have very different ingredients in there. Let's just whiz past these. Do change your warm-ups and your cool-downs to support if you are doing a lot of heavy chest work, for example, 1 rep max on bench, things like this. We would expect to see a lot more shoulder mobility coming into the dynamic stretches in your warm-up. So please do change your warm-ups and your cool-downs to suit the content of your program. Then at the end, we're looking at alternative environments. And then we're moving into partner-assisted work. And just general partner work, group work that we can just probably add a little bit of fun to the session as well. So hopefully that's helped. Please do complete this in stages. So start off with the consultation, look at your fitness testing, recap on your advanced training methods, be 110% sure that you know what we mean by 60% of a 1 rep max and which zone that's going to be in. Because if we're not clear on that, we can't choose the right ingredients for our client. From there, transfer all the information over that you have from your client consultation. So we're not going in blind with this. You've already got quite a lot of information, and do use mappers and additional sheets to plan everything out first. Take a step back. Imagine you doing that program yourself, sometimes helps, and then transfer it over onto your fit microcycles for 12 weeks. Finish off with your alternative environments and your group work. So hopefully that's made things a little bit easier for you, and have a go. Try not to overthink it. Safe, effective, progressive, that's the keywords that we're looking for.